This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Dr. Rimslin did an interview with the New York Times, and it sounds like, in my opinion, that she's planning to platform Bryan Kohberger. This is Bryan Kohberger's former professor. She not only had him for one class, she had him for multiple classes, between 3 and 4 classes, while he was attending at DeSales. Let's talk about Dr. Rimslin and this bizarre interview that she gave to the New York Times this weekend. She is being characterized as one of the nation's most prominent experts on SK in this interview. And she said she got word from her colleague about one of her former students, that would be Bryan Kohberger, being arrested for doing away with Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. And so I guess my question is anybody really questioning whether or not she is an expert? I mean, she's a professor, she has an education, but she had a Ted Bundy wannabe, which is Bryan Kohberger, sitting right in her classroom. And she, not just for one class, but for multiple classes, and she didn't even notice. And I was just, I just curious, if she's, an expert, then why couldn't she pick out a copycat Ted Bundy wannabe? If all this BTK book and everything that she's claiming, is true. And according to Dr. Rimslin, this is going back to the New York Times, she said, quote, "It left her completely stunned and that she doubted it could possibly be true." And again, I'm like, this is supposed to be an expert on SKs, and she's got one in her classrooms, multiple, plural. And, I'm seeing her on News Nation. And after reading this New York Times, I don't believe that, I just find it hard that even after she's hearing this, she still can't believe that it's true. This is something that a layperson would say, not something that I would think an expert would say. Let me know if you have a different feeling. And I'm not saying she's not a great professor. I'm sure she's a wonderful teacher. Think that how we characterize people really matters. And I just think that it's concerning that she couldn't pick up on anything weird about this guy, especially in light of the WSU students who thought he was very weird and very strange. So I think, in my opinion, she knew it was true, and that she wanted to ingratiate herself into Bryan Kohberger and into his family, because I think she is planning to write a book. She said, quote, "I thought they have to be wrong." This is Dr. Rimslin. "This has to be wrong. It's not the Bryan Kohberger I know." And okay, if she's the expert, the SK expert, and and it's not the Bryan Kohberger that she knows, well, what was the point of spending 5 years writing a book with BTK serial Dennis Rader if she can't even pick out a budding copycat? And that when she hears about it, she still doesn't think that it's the Bryan that she knows. I think she's a good professor, but I think it's a mistake to characterize her as some type of SK expert. That's just my opinion. Let me know if you have a different one. And I'm not, as a human being, I'm sure she's very nice. As a teacher, a professor, I think she's very nice. But getting together with Dennis Rader for 5 years to write books with him, I don't know if that did anything for anybody except Dennis Rader. It gave him a lot of attention. It gave him narcissistic supply. But she continues on in this troubling New York Times interview. She says, at DeSales University, where this is part of the article, where Mr. Kohberger got his master's degree in criminal justice in 2022, Dr. Rimslin, a professor of forensic psychology who has written extensively about high-profile murderers, including an examination of the SK known as BTK. Her books include The Mind of a Murderer and How to Catch a SK. I'm watching my words. So, I feel like she wrote these books with BTK, but I don't think it told us a lot about how to catch them or to how to get into the mind of somebody like this. And do we need to get into the mind of somebody like this? Let me know what you think. Because she had Bryan Kohberger sitting right in front of her for multiple classes and didn't even know. So again, what is the research value of this? I can see doing a peer-reviewed article or journal, but what is the value of spending 5 years with Dennis Rader to write multiple books? But just wait, it gets worse, because it says, over the years, Dr. Rimslin, this is back to New York Times article, she has always kept aware of the prospect that people might take her courses and learn the methods of SKs in order to build on their own nefarious ideas. And she said her time with Mr. Kohberger, she never had that concern. Okay, so what was the point of spending 5 years with Dennis Rader writing the book? Obviously, it's not helping people to spot future SKs. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I just think that I'm really concerned that she's going to platform Bryan Kohberger and his family and turn him into, some type of empathetic, sympathetic character so that she can get the access that she wants to write the book. But, he's ice cold. We all saw him in the plea deal. There was no empathy for the victims. There was no empathy for their loved ones. There was no, I'm so sorry I did this. No shame. There was nothing going on behind those eyes. Even the people that encountered him at that pool party that, in Idaho when he first got there, or ran into him hiking when they were coming down the mountain and he was going up, they even thought he was weird. The WSU students, where he was grading females differently than males, thought he was weird. But listen to how Dr. Ramsland characterizes him. And remember, this is a new New York Times article. She said he was very polite, respectful, seemingly genuinely engaged with the material as a potential researcher, teacher, somebody who was interested in a career. This is what Dr. Ramsland is saying about him. So again, he went on a date with a young woman, told her she had nice birthing hips. The Seven Sirens owner, not a SK expert, but he had a file or a little card on Bryan Kohberger because he was harassing female students. He was a creeper. But she's, I know it's like probably hard for people to believe that knew him, but the fact that she saw no red flags with this guy at all, and even when she heard this, and wait, this article gets worse. It just gets worse. It says, after Mr. Kohberger's arrest in December of 2022, weeks after the, I'm watching my words, murders in Moscow, Idaho, she expected he would clear his name. But she found it odd that Mr. Kohberger was not offering an alibi. Well, yeah, because he did it. And then the article continues. When one finally did emerge more than a year after the case began, Mr. Kohberger said he had been out driving on the night these crimes were committed. I'm paraphrasing. I'm watching my words here. And she said, this is Dr. Ramsland said, I thought that's not an alibi. And it's not. She's possibly going to platform this guy. She's under a gag order, so she shouldn't be giving any interviews at all. But she, Howard Blum said she was trying to ingratiate herself with Bryan Kohberger's family, and that they agreed to, are they going to write a book with her, and are they going to cash in? One way to circumvent the family members from getting the money from the book deal would for Bryan Kohberger to just have it all go to his family members, Michael, Marianne, and his two sisters, Amanda and Melissa. And they could put it in his commissary on his behalf, put it in a trust account for him, and then he can still cash in, and the family members of the victims get nothing. Dr. Ramsland still declined to, this is according to New York Times, to discuss specifics and his academics because of student privacy laws. And months before Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana were done away with, a Reddit user who identified himself as Bryan Kohberger asked people who had spent time in prison about a survey about crimes they had committed, and the survey listed Mr. Kohberger as a student investigator and asked respondents about their thoughts, emotions, actions from the beginning to the end of the crime process. And Dr. Ramsland said that this was the kind of survey might look suspicious in hindsight now that Mr. Kohberger has been charged with a crime, but in a criminology department, that kind of research has been common for decades. But I guess what I want to know is, did she know that he was calling one of the people that gave him, he creeped out one of the criminals that answered his survey. He creeped him out because he called and wanted to hear the details of the crimes, multiple times. He was reliving this crime through this guy. So he creeped him out, but Dr. Ramsland, the SK expert, nothing at all. Dr. Ramsland said that in the aftermath of Mr. Kohberger's arrest, she reached out to his family to offer support. So there it is. She's already reached out to his family. And, so Howard Blum was right about this. She was reaching out to BK's family, offering support. This is what he was trying to report out. And then she turned around and said, well, she wasn't reaching out to Bryan Kohberger. Okay, but you're reaching out to the family. Howard Blum was telling the truth about that. They had not remained in touch. This is what she said to New York Times. They had not remained in touch. She has not corresponded with Mr. Kohberger since the spring of 2022, before the crimes, but that she wanted, this is New York Times, she wanted to try to connect with him in the future to better understand him. This professor wants to connect with Bryan Kohberger. She's putting it out there publicly in the New York Times. I'm sure he knows about it. I'm sure his family members know about it, to connect with him in the future to understand him better. Again, she's going to spend years giving this guy exactly what he wants, infamy. She's going to tell his story from his point of view, tell the story from the family member's point of view, and then, are the proceeds of this book going to go to the victims' family members, or is there going to be an end run around, and is there going to be a cash in? And are we going to continue to platform people that commit crimes like this and allow them to cash in? All he has to do is have his family members make some comments in the book, and they can get paid for everything. He can get paid nothing, and the victims' families get nothing. I just have a problem with that. Let me know what you think. Let's continue on with the article, because I think this is absolutely appalling, in my opinion. It says, quote, in the meantime, she said, this is Dr. Ramsland, it makes sense to her that he had decided to enter a guilty plea rather than going to trial. She said, I wasn't surprised by the plea once the judge took away every option, that he couldn't use his alibi. He couldn't use an alternative suspect. There's nothing left, Dr. Ramsland said. And now he's facing a lot of evidence piled up and the DP, so it did not surprise me. And I just want to say there's so much problems with what she just said in this paragraph that I just read you. She said, quote, the judge took away every option. Took away? You mean the judge didn't allow Ann Taylor to impugn the reputation of 4 innocent people so that Bryan Kohberger could try to get off? Took away? That's how she's characterizing this? The judge took it away because he wanted Ann Taylor to offer actual evidence before Ann Taylor could trash somebody's reputation on internationally televised trial. The judge didn't take away Bryan Kohberger's option to provide an alibi. Also, BK was granted extension after extension. The judge was simply following the law in Idaho, which says that the alibi has to say where the person was at the time of the crimes. And he went way above. Normally, the alibi has to be provided within 10 days of when the prosecution asked for it. And here we are over 2.5 years later, and Bryan Kohberger just did his plea deal. But 2.5 years later, he was still being granted extensions to provide an alibi. And instead, Ann Taylor was going to put out a conspiracy theory about Bryan Kohberger driving around in his car. She was going to use Cy to do it. And the judge said that's not an alibi. And he's just following what Idaho law says. So to me, Dr. Ramsland saying that the judge took away every option from Bryan Kohberger to provide alternative suspects, I'm sorry, but she's definitely offering sympathy for Bryan Kohberger. She's definitely offering sympathy because the judge didn't allow Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger to drag 4 innocent people. Remember, they did this just a week before they went in to ask for this plea deal from the prosecution. And I think it's absolutely appalling that they went in to ruin 4 people's lives to get this Ted Bundy wannabe off the hook. Imagine if you were one of these 4 people and the defense attorney singled you out without any evidence at all, just so she could create reasonable doubt for Bryan Kohberger. And so here we have Dr. Ramsland willing to give Bryan Kohberger everything that he wants. He is going to love having her undivided attention for the next 5 years while she writes multiple books for him. And he's going to get all kinds of narcissistic supply. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. It's free and it helps me out a lot. Give this a thumbs up and drop me a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. And I look forward to seeing you next time.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough. Nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me, but let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all this stuff. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough. Nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me, but let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all